one of the other big messages that I've given to so many of my clients is, how would you treat someone that you love and care for? Right? So why are we not able to give ourselves the same amount of grace that we would give our best friends, our mothers, daughters, sisters, whoever? Yeah. Why can we not give ourselves that grace? This is the biggest transformation you will ever go through in your entire life.
Yes.
And I think that there is definitely that lost sense of innate kind of knowledge and yes. empowerment and all these beautiful, beautiful qualities.
Hello, Quanta folks, and welcome to another episode of Fark the Shoulds podcast vlogcast. I'm very excited today to be having a conversation about looking after ourselves after birth, which universally is done pretty poorly in these Western countries because we're so busy doing. So let's jump right into the conversation. I am Jodie from Quanta Mama, and today I'm joined by the beautiful Jen, who is very excitingly expecting her baby very soon, but she also offers post-birth care, and she's going to talk more about that and why it's so important to do that. So Jen is Nurturing Connections with Jen, and you can find her on socials. And Jen, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jodie. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And obviously something that's very close to my heart at the moment, going through my own personal journey, but also having been this being my passion for a very long time.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, let's do a quick synopsis, because I think for people out there listening and watching, they will know that I've had 4 babies, and one of the things that I've rocked with each baby is empowered birth. Like the first one was kind of okay, and then I really, sunk my teeth into it from the second, third, and fourth. But one thing that I didn't do was take really great care of myself post-birth, and that's why I really want to have this conversation, because someone even as well versed in this stuff as me, I think really if I knew what I knew now, I would do it completely differently. And so that's why I'm really keen. So walk us through what post-birth care looks like, and particularly where your particular interest is in supporting mothers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we all fall into that trap. And I think, like you said at the start, Western society is very much have a baby, okay, cool, and you're back to life. There's beautiful, beautiful traditions in other cultures that are really honouring and amazing to mothers that, keep them in bed with their babies for a certain amount of time and have all of these kind of family and villages come in for this support. And we just don't have any of that. Not sure why, but we don't. So I think that that's really come to the forefront. And, there's these bits and pieces that kind of get thrown out when you're going through these systems, like, oh, make sure you look after yourself after you have baby. But it's like, what does that actually even really look like or feel like? And I think one of the biggest umbrellas that I can sort of come to is connection and attachment and bonding. Because if we are not actually taking that time to get to know our babies and to get to know ourselves as this new parent role, that kind of sets us up for some of those challenges kind of a little bit later on. And having worked in the perinatal mental health counselling space for the last 6 years, I very much have seen how that can lead to those really difficult times for mums and new parents. So I think my biggest passion, my biggest kind of hope is to really put those supports and the focus on connection and recovery, and really asking for those supports really early on so that we don't get to that crisis point. We don't actually need to wait until we are at that exhausted, overwhelmed kind of state. There's so much we can be doing in those moments, those first moments, first few weeks when we get home with bubs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an interesting thing for me, and we will talk more about the details because obviously people, need something tangible to kind of hang on to go,
Mm,
okay, well, what's the solution? What does that look like?
mm,
But I absolutely agree with what you're saying in terms of the impact, and where I'm really interested in the conversation, and it keeps coming up, is this permission-based world that we're in, where we don't do stuff until we have the universal boulder hit us, swiftly and knock us down the hill, to actually create that environment of receiving and resourcing ourselves in a way that probably would have put us in a very different place if we had have actually just taken that on. And so part of this postnatal care, when we break it down for people, what I would love to do is just to have the whole baby gift thing completely rewritten so that it's, things that actually nurture the family and do promote that connection. You can literally just hang out with your baby and get the rest that you absolutely need after running a marathon, which is birth, however it unfolds. But that thing of, so what are the basics that people can do? And so when you talk about, how will you be doing post-birth care, given you are right on the precipice of welcoming your baby? What's that going to look like
mhm.
for you? So people have got a game plan.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest learnings that I have uh, come through in my own lived experience this time, but as well as walking alongside so many women in my professional kind of realm as well, is that we need to start having these conversations earlier. This is actually a whole journey process. And from when you conceive, from when, you're first pregnant, that's when we should be starting to have these conversations. We really need to start to link all of this into intrinsically this beautiful, amazing transition in our lives, rather than these separate kind of elements of pregnancy. Okay, now we're going to give birth and we're going to, talk about all the physical stuff, and we're going to focus on all the, the physical elements and what that's going to be like and how you get through this section. Okay, now
Yeah.
this section. I really
Yeah.
would love that to be a bit more of a fluid,
Mm.
um, and early intervention is best. That's from my professional kind of
Yeah.
realm. And the earlier we can start to talk about that and start to make plans around that. And, I think when I say make plans, I want to be really cautious about that, because we don't need more checklists. We
Yeah.
actually don't. I think checklists create such stress, and stress parents are, isolated parents, and isolated parents are stressed parents. And so,
Yes.
a massive message. And I know that
Mm.
you are a huge advocate for this, and it's
Mm.
about building your village, right? From
Yes.
from early on, from really early on, getting whoever it is that you feel you can trust and be around and have that amazing kind of like those beautiful energies with, and just getting them on board.
Yeah.
How do we do this together? How do we make this transition such that is extremely supportive and incredible for the whole family, right? So it's not just mum.
Yes, absolutely. Because, well, I mean, there is a staggering rate of relationships that are under huge pressure in the first year of having a baby, because the
Yes.
dynamic absolutely shifts. And, this beautiful mummy and daddy time that created this human then suddenly
Yeah.
gets shunted to, this very dependent human being that now requires a lot of energy and,
Mm-hmm.
is really exhausting. I know one of the things that I would certainly recommend to, any pregnant couples that I'm talking to would be to rest, right,
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. But that advice was given to me, and I reflect on that and I go, why didn't I do that? Because I definitely did not rest after I gave birth. I mean, a couple of sleeps in there, but, the advice was always, when the baby's sleeping, you sleep. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hell no. When the baby's sleeping, I'm going to go have some time to get all the stuff done that I want to get done. So
Yeah.
when we have these women that are, very conditioned and used to being busy and ticking things off the list, it's about acknowledging we don't want to lose that sense of, I guess, identity, because we've already got a new identity being that of the mother, which we probably feel completely unequipped for and,
Yeah.
often under-resourced. And so when you support women postnatally who are, roll like I do, lots of energy generally till you get too tired, and, want to keep doing and have that sense of wanting to still hold on to who they are by getting stuff done so they won't go and sleep when the baby sleeps. What are some of the other ways that we can still meet that need for rest and replenishment, but also meet that need of, I guess, sating the identity?
Yeah, and I think that this is actually one of the biggest kind of elements that have come up, especially in my perinatal mental health counsellor role as well, is really this sense of identity and where does it go and how does it change and how does that feel? And again, I think it is about raising that awareness of when you're pregnant or when you're ready, having a baby, this is not just a physical aspect thing. This is going
No.
to change everything about you in a very holistic nature. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about ways that we hold on to some of those elements of our identity and also get okay with that being adaptable. So it might not look exactly the same.
Yeah.
And we know that that's not really realistic because it
Yes.
just can't be.
Yeah.
But how do we still hold on to some of that? So, like it is about understanding, you can't go to the gym for an hour for a session. Okay, that's fine.
Mm.
But can we still walk? Can we still work in, a few stretches or some yoga or a walk or,
Yeah.
just something that kind of fills that cup that you feel this is not just me as mum, this is me as an individual.
Yes.
Because the loss of identity is honestly one of the greatest risk factors of postnatal depression. We know that.
Yes.
So we really want to be making a lot of room and spaciousness to understand that this transition has a lot to do with us. I think there is a big element of mums being taken away from the equation of mum and bub post-birth.
Yes. Absolutely.
Everything is about baby, we're meeting
Yes.
all the baby's needs, all the appointments about baby, everything, all our visitors are like, oh, how's baby going,
Mm.
but we actually intrinsically cannot talk about baby without talking about mum. And we need to bring mum back into that equation in a really big way. And that's a big part of my work.
So when you're working with the women, how
Mm.
then do they get that message to their community?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely obviously an individual kind of issue for all of us because our communities can be really well-meaning, but they
Yes.
can have, some kind of impactful things to say or do that puts mum on a bit of a back foot. But I think I you know I think we're also not very good at boundaries these days. So permission is one thing that I think we're not great at, or we
Yes.
ask too much of, but also boundaries, getting really clear about what do I feel comfortable with, what don't I, and how do I actually have those conversations? And that's
Yes.
actually another big piece of my work as well, is sitting down and saying, this is actually your sacred space to be a mother. And this is the time for your bonding and connection with your baby, for your recovery, for, to really think about what each of you needs. And we're going to try and, I guess as much as possible, block out all of that noise, that societal kind of expectations, those checklists, those, oh, I have to do this out of obligation or I have to do that. And we're
All
going
the
to just try
shoulds.
and,
All the
yeah, all the
shoulds.
shoulds, but the
Yeah.
shoulds.
Yep. That's it.
um, so yeah, it definitely is about actually sitting down with and getting really clear about your values, about what you're comfortable with and what you're not, and actually, yeah, putting in those boundaries with people that we love and care about. And you can do that in a really kind, nurturing, loving way. But just getting
Yes.
really clear on our boundaries, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's so much richness in it because I can see that when you have the catalyst for that information early on in your parenting career or journey, shall we say, or identity even, it can have a really profound impact on how things go forward, and certainly advocating for your children in that space. And, one of the things that McGill and I have, I guess, benefited from is the decision to change the kids' education, which then was the ultimate advocacy because it was against the tide of what everyone else was doing in the majority. But the birth thing was interesting because I was still being the old me. So I reflect on that. And, I'm on the eve of turning 49, and my beautiful soul sisters in my women's circle are planning my birthday. And I'm still unpacking resistance of receiving a birthday celebration. And I find that a really interesting thing to experience when my eldest is like 16. And when I think about in the sliding doors moment, if I had to be in that space of receiving in the postpartum period and really saying, you know what, this is what I need as an individual. I've just done an extraordinary thing. Like I grew a microscopic cell into a whole human that has an opinion. So like literally, I'm a version of a god or a goddess here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an extraordinary thing, right? And so, and then we kind of go, no, it's cool. I got everything. So part of my desire for women is to witness that these shifts that you make now because you've got an excuse and permission to receive will have a massive ripple effect on how your relationships go into the future and how you advocate for your kids and how you advocate for yourself and all the boundaries you're talking about. And so that's the kind of stuff that I just want to say to people, you don't get, it's not just that, like it's everything in terms of how you approach life. And we have this really easy way to receive because you have an excuse given you're recovering to receive things, so we can do things like we can accept a meal train. Yeah. We can accept a cleaner. We can have a postpartum doula who literally just holds space for us whilst we go through the recovery, and we don't even need to wait until there's a mental health crisis. And, I think the work that you women do in this space is so important, but it's also still a little bit reactionary because the penny hasn't dropped in the collective consciousness that this doesn't need to be an offense. It can be a defense. It can be a proactive move that we have that will pay you dividends, 20 years down the track, where you just receive a birthday celebration from some women you love and you go, sure, I'm worthy of all that.
Yeah.
So how do we shunt the collective consciousness? Because it seems to me that the way society is set up is that we all wait for crisis until we make a change, whether that's for us personally or for one of our loved ones, and then we go, oh, we're going to do it differently. What are some of the ways that you feel, would shift that for people?
Yeah, look, I think this is actually a big reason why I started Nurturing Connections with Jen, because coming from a social work background and being within the systems is very reactionary. And it's something that I have tried to come up against so much in my career of, where we are the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and we're not, not actually at the top of the cliff giving the education and the awareness that needs to be there so that people don't jump off.
Yes.
Metaphorically.
No, I love that. I mean, so right, because some people will fly, but without instruction, they'll plummet.
That's
so
right.
they do people need a framework, even if it's the framework is listening to their own inner wisdom. And so I really appreciate that because it's a witnessing of not being there just for the aftermath. And what you're saying, I think, is probably the crux of how we're going to shift society or awaken society is that we need more nurturing connections with Jen. Essentially, because then the weight goes that way, right? The tide swings that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's why I'm saying, in the learning and growing of, I've sort of said I'm post-birth and all this kind of rhetoric. But what I'm actually really starting to feel in my heart is that those conversations really need to be had much earlier on. You know, we have these antenatal classes and we have these educational classes done by the hospitals and all these things, and I've just done them myself, and they're very informative in some areas, but there's this huge space that needs to be filled, I believe, and I think is really vital to our well-being and our mental health, and as you said, the ripple effect for the rest of our lives is we actually, you know, where's the inner work? Where do we stop and actually reflect on ourselves and what's going on within us emotionally and mentally through that journey? Because that's going to actually set us up, you know, when Bubs comes home and there is those really hard times of being exhausted and you know, deprived and all the rest of it, is how, you know, we actually have some of those tools of emotional regulation, say, or we have some of those tools of reflecting and understanding, okay, this is sort of a challenge point for me, but this is something that I've actually looked at, worked on, even before Bubs gets there. You know,
Yes.
we of course we want to capture the people that, you know, haven't been able to get to that space yet.
Yes.
And of course, that can still be done. But the later and later that gets done, you know, the trickier and trickier it kind of becomes, because we've got this added complexity of this little being that we love and adore and want the best for. But in that love and adoration, a lot of what we do is completely lose ourselves, right? So
Yes.
we put ourselves on the back burner. And I think the biggest message, one of the biggest things, and I don't know how many times I've actually said this, is you cannot fill from an empty cup. And
Absolutely.
the more that we try and do that, the more we're actually depriving both Bubs and us.
Yes.
And we only look after Bubs if we look after ourselves.
Yes. I heard a version of that from a guy called Jerry from Star Magic, and I just loved it. What he said was, you give from your saucer, not your cup. And it just, the analogy for me is you fit your own oxygen mask before you fit your child's on a plane.
You
And
have
I
to.
wonder if that happens in reality because we're so conditioned to be of service. But the eloquence of giving from a saucer just always reminds me that I must fill up my own cup, and then I give from my saucer to everyone. You know, my priority obviously is always my family and my, you know, beloveds, but I want to be able to give to everybody as well. And you're so right. You cannot give from your cup. And in fact, when we give from our cup, we don't model to anyone else how to give from the saucer.
No,
So in
no.
the aspect of radical self-responsibility and, you know, being a really good community member, you need to be a whole individual at the same time. And maybe that will be part of the shift for, you know, women who are approaching the birth of their baby, is to take some radical responsibility and say, all right, what are some of the things I'm going to need to do for my post-birth care? Because
Mm,
it's a lot. Like, the whole thing
mhm.
is a lot, plus all the hormonal changes, plus suddenly you turn into a cow, and, you know, somehow your uterus has got to shrink back down to the size it was, and, you know, like, all the
Yeah.
things, plus you got to work on sleep deprivation, all of
Yeah.
which is possible, but
Mm,
because we're trying to hang on to the old identity, it's not congruent. So
yeah.
it's a mismatch, isn't it? The two identities are a mismatch, so there has to be a melding instead of one or the other.
Absolutely. I think, you know, one of the other big messages that I've given to so many of my clients is, how would you treat someone that you love and care for? Right? So why are we not able to give ourselves the same amount of grace that we would give our best friends, our mothers, daughters, sisters, you know, whoever?
Yeah.
Why can we not give ourselves that grace? This is the biggest transformation you will ever go through in your entire life.
Yes.
And, you know, I think that there is definitely that lost sense of innate kind of knowledge and
Yes.
empowerment and, you know, all these beautiful, beautiful qualities, and they get taken over by these checklists. I know I keep going back to this checklist, but, you know, if we actually think about what each of us needs, and especially what Bubs needs in this time, they need to be fed, clothed, kept warm, loved. You know, they don't need all of these routines and these structures and these, all of these bits and pieces that come in and create this sense of, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. You do know what you're doing. It's the most natural thing in
Correct.
the world.
That's right.
So
You
if
didn't
we can,
question yourself when you were growing the baby. I mean, that's what's interesting.
exactly.
For the most part, I know that medical intervention still kicks in and there's a bunch of tests that we may or may not need. Sometimes they feel like fishing expeditions, but for the most part, you didn't question it. And once you felt secure in the pregnancy being viable, you just go through the feels of whatever that is, the
Yeah.
symptoms and all that sort of stuff. But you don't question the fact that they're going to grow an arm or an eyebrow or a toenail. Like, it just occurs, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then we've got this sense of, because reflected everywhere around us is parenting, not growing humans. And so then we go into the comparison, which is obviously the thief of joy. And you
Yes.
forget your own inner knowing, but you have your own set of instructions. And the other thing that's really cool is Mother Nature is out there just to confirm as well, because, she's so beautiful in the way that she unfolds various things. I mean, it's a great reference for birth, but it's also a great reference for the postnatal period as well.
It is, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So that's one thing, peeps. You have your own set of instructions. You have your own innate abilities. So I encourage you to revisit that as an idea. And if it feels uncomfortable, revisit it 5 times a day and feel into it. And because at some stage you'll have an experience that reminds you that that is the case, because it exists. It's not something
Yeah.
you need to discover. It's something that you need to remember. You need to reintegrate it into your knowing so that it's in your mind when that
Yeah.
comes to that sort of challenge or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Go
We
on,
have
Jen.
we have so many strengths and capacities within us, and it always I just find it funny is not the right word, but I find it funny how we forget how that those strengths and capacities could not be transitioned into this context. So, someone that is very organized, or someone that, that can roll with the punches or whatever else, it's like that still applies here. It doesn't actually just go out the window because this parenting context is completely new. Yes,
Yeah.
it's new. Yes, give yourself grace. Yes, give yourself time. But that doesn't mean that everything that you are and who you've been and who you've become and what you have within you just goes away.
No, I mean, that's all your point of reference and your learning. I mean, I really like, when I'm feeling challenged, I really do my best just to remember that everything is unfolding perfectly for me. So there is wisdom in everything, even when it's a discomfort or it's the opposite of what I want, because I have that as a contrast, right? So I'm not saying I live in airy fairy, gratitude land all the time, but in those moments of challenge, I'm like, there's got to be wisdom in here. I just got to work through the emotion of it first. And so within that space then, how then do we want to proceed forward with helping women to realise this? Like, I have some basics that I did or I wish I did. So the two things. So one thing that I started doing after I experienced was placenta encapsulation. And it sounds completely disgusting and it resonates only for a few people, and that's completely fine. But it was a game changer because I had a birth without it, and then I had the next 3 births with. And the only thing I'll say about it is I felt so good having placenta capsules that I would go and do all the busy things. So I stayed with that identity of the doing. And so now with my wisdom, I would do that differently. I would feel good. And I say that to people, feel good lying down. You don't have to feel good and do stuff. Just feel good and lie down. So that's one thing. Another thing I would willingly receive is I would receive being discharged or released from the parenting duty, even if it's just to go stand on the sand at the beach listening to the waves, or go be in nature and immerse myself in trees. Basically recalibrate my nervous system in alignment with nature and get some grounding. I would do that. And you can do that for 15 minutes. I mean, that would be plenty to recalibrate. And then the other thing I would do is I noticed with my first, because I was sleep deprived, I had this real need for sugar. And so, of course, I turned into a complete sugar whore. And, oh, God, I'd get up with him and I'd breastfeed at night at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd set myself up in front of the TV and I'd have some chocolate next to me and a cup of tea and I'd breastfeed. And it was this whole, kind of production. It was just nuts. And by the number 2, I worked out, just chuck the baby next to you, you co-sleep, they feed, and it's done, right? And you actually sleep well. But what would I do? I would have some nourishing foods. I'd up my magnesium. I'd, look for better choices, because I realised obviously sugar was down-regulating me and making me more tired. And so there are some really basic things that I just kind of take for granted now that I would want to bring in. And I would definitely get a cleaner. Oh my God, I would get a cleaner. That's the other thing I would do. Or someone to come hold the baby, something like that. Or make me food, make meals. Oh, far out. What are some practical things that you suggest for women? What can they take away as going, oh, that's a cool idea?
Yeah. I mean, I think everything that you're talking about, it's really interesting that you're saying you sort of take it for granted. But, when we talk about strategies, I don't like the term as much, but it's actually so much more simple than we think, or that we overcomplicate these things. We don't live in gratitude land all the time, airy fairy, but gratitude is so, so powerful. Even waking up in the morning and just thinking of a couple of things that you're grateful for, very first thing in the morning, just really sets your nervous system and your mind up into that space of, well, this is kind of abundance and joy and love, rather than, I'm going to think about all the difficult things for the day,
Absolutely.
So, there are these things a lot of my clients, I get to just, even if it's really difficult for them, because for some people it can be, to start just jotting down just one thing that you think you've done really well that day, or that, you've had that moment of connection and joy with Barb. And then the next day, can you do 2? And the next day, can you do 3? Because what we do a lot of the time is and I think our brains are unfortunately a bit wired like this, but we focus on the negative, right? So we focus on, well, I didn't get that quite right, and Bob was crying for this long, and I didn't get my laundry done, or whatever it was. But we also don't give ourselves or highlight for ourselves the amazing ways that we're actually meeting all of Bub's needs, and that we're caring for ourselves, and that we're providing this incredible role as a mother within our family system. And the other thing that I would say is, you were saying before, you would, check out of that parenting role as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's always been said for a reason. It takes a village, and it's supposed to take a village. And this idea of isolation and this societal kind of toxic independence, I'm not sure where this has come from, but that's not how we were meant to raise babies and children. And, we are innately wired for connection. So it's okay to give your baby to someone for 10 minutes to go and do something, because you're actually giving that baby more than if you held on to the egoic kind of, I need to do it all by myself, way of thinking. So my 2 biggest things is your village. Be okay with your village. Be okay with knowing that you're actually doing the best that you can possibly do for that baby by having a village. And let's simplify. What does baby actually need, as opposed to all of the society kind of social media pressures of, consumerism, and it needs this wake time, and it needs this toy, and it needs this. And it's like, no, it really doesn't. The way that babies make their neural pathways is your face, is your facial expressions, is connection to you, to their primary attachment figure. And again, the evidence actually continually backs this, but it's just not what's out there in the media, unfortunately.
Well, it doesn't sell very well, unfortunately, so you can't make $1 off it. But yeah, absolutely. And look, I want to close on essentially those sentiments, because if you're someone who needs to give yourself permission, like I do at 49 to receive a birthday circle, then use the excuse of this will be in your baby's highest good, even if you can't make it okay for your highest good. And also that you have permission to get your village assembled, because people do want to be of service. That's how we're great community members, and we fill ourselves up as individuals. Jen, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. This is a very powerful conversation, and may it have ripple effects through our community as women continue to perfect the ability to receive.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to put out there that at the moment, obviously 37 weeks pregnant, I'm having my own little journey at the moment.
Yeah.
So in terms of individual services, I will be offering home visits and kind of more of that really personalized support and things once I get myself through my postpartum recovery and take that time to really honor that transition for myself. But in the meantime, I'm absolutely up for, give me a call. We can have a chat. I'm happy to do, some telehealth or some phone calls. I'm feeling really good at the moment. So I'm really, really grateful and blessed for that. And if there's any way that I can support anyone out there through this time, then that's what I'm really passionate about. So please.
Absolutely. You heard it there, folks. So spread the word, nurturing connections with Jen. She's available. She's an amazing support, and she'll be back. So stay well, beautiful Quanta folks. We'll look forward to talking with you very soon. And Jen, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jodie.
Beautiful Quanta folks. At Quanta Mama, we have a mandate that we feel so passionate about. We want and we are raising the community's vibration and frequency and consciousness through parenting and birth experiences. Such incredible, transformational experiences that will shape you as a person and are the very fabric of life. You want to find out how to high vibe your experience even more? Then Quanta Mama is your place. Head there for the High Vibe Birth course, Ultimate Preparation for Birthing. Head there if you want to re-engage your child in the love of learning for the Take the Leap course, which is a deschooling course for parents. There's beautiful mind movies, and obviously this podcast is there, and we are here to support you. So head there for all the juice.